All right, so there are some really cool things happening with Kotlin multi-platform mobile lately that we really need to talk about. So let's get started. This is a great time to tell you guys that today's video is being sponsored by Roback. If you visit the link in the description, you'll be able to get 15% off your next order, and it would really support our channel. I appreciate the support from you guys. Now let's get back to the video. So there have been a lot of big changes since the last video that I posted. So I thought it might be a great time to post a KMM update for everyone who's watching, just to see, what are some of the latest developments on Kotlin multi-platform mobile, because there have been a lot of great changes lately, and wanted to get them in front of you guys and sort of explain them and just walk through them a little bit. And potentially we can kind of dive into, what are the implications of these changes and what do we think they might look like in the future. So to start out with here, I've got the link for, it's the JetBrains website. I'll put the link in the description of the video. Essentially here, it's doing what we didn't think was possible originally with Kotlin multi-platform, as far as getting the UI layer code at a point where we could potentially write Jetpack Compose code and have it work on both Android and iOS. So some pretty cool stuff there. Sebastian Eigner and Nikita Lipsky were the two guys that presented this at the Kotlin Conf 23 a couple weeks ago. Actually, I guess it's been almost a month ago now. But some really cool things to see there. If you guys are interested, I definitely would recommend going and watching that video, just to get a feel for the current state of the alpha release of Compose multi-platform iOS. But the really cool thing about their video, I think, is it really gives you the ability to kind of see where this is going and what could potentially be possible in the future. So some really cool stuff there. Again, the big thing here is being able to reuse Kotlin code within the UI. So in some of the previous videos that I recorded, one of the things I talked about was being able to reuse Kotlin code within your business logic layer, so the data layers and the repository layers. The cool thing about Compose for iOS is that you can essentially write Jetpack Compose code within the shared module of your KMM app, and it'll compile into Swift UI code because of some UI code routing within the iOS layer of the app. Essentially, it's compiling Jetpack Compose into a UI controller layer in Swift UI, which gives you kind of the illusion that you're writing code in one place and it's running on both platforms. Again, still really in its infancy. It's only on alpha release at the moment. So still working through a lot of kinks there. I'm actually working, and we'll post a video here shortly, of a kind of a just basic use case of a Compose iOS UI. As you can see here in the on the JetBrains blog here that they wrote about Compose for iOS, you get a feel for here where you've got, the shared business logic of Kotlin kind of on the back end, but then you have, Compose multi-platform being introduced here, where you can kind of tie some UI kit and Android views together, where you can potentially have an app where all the UI, all the, the shared business logic code could potentially all be written in Kotlin, which I think would be a really, really cool, future state for this technology. But we'll move on down. Again, the big thing here is it's built on Jetpack Compose. So for us Android engineers that are used to using Jetpack Compose purely for Android, you'll be able to use the same exact libraries, the Compose libraries, as you currently use, and they will just be compiled into iOS and be able to run within the iOS ecosystem. So pretty cool stuff there. One thing that I will go over before we move out of this and kind of into like a project structure view of what Compose for iOS looks like is that there's still really a key component here that's missing to have an end-to-end app written purely in Kotlin. Really, we still have to have some kind of a state layer between our UI and the business logic. There's a few good libraries out there right now that are working to solve this problem. Decompose is a good one. And there's another open source project called Moco MVVM. I'll link those in the description of this video too. So if you're interested, you can go check that out. But that seems like it's going to be the next iteration of this, KMM process of being able to write code in the UI layer and in the business layer. We also are going to have view models that can, be consumed by Android and iOS. So some really cool stuff there. But with that, we'll move into the Compose iOS project view, and I'll kind of go over what that looks like. All right, so now that we've gone over some of the updates for the Compose multi-platform iOS, I thought it might be a good idea to pull up GitHub and show you guys what the current Compose iOS template looks like for KMM. So I've got that pulled up over here, and we'll just kind of walk through it just to show you kind of where the Compose UI lives really within this project. So I'll go inside of the shared folder, and we'll go click through a lot of these directories. We've got to go through Android main. So inside of common main, or we've got to go through the source directory, sorry. And then inside of common main, we've got Kotlin and resources. And you go inside the Kotlin directory, and then you have the app level file. So app is like the root composable that all of the composables that you build for your app will run through. So this is your entry point in a Compose iOS template. And so you'll see down here, you've got a couple of remember vars there, primarily because this is just basically like you click a button and a picture will slide on and off the screen. So pretty primitive stuff just for proof of concept purposes. So you can see that there. What you also can do here is, again, it's completely, Jetpack Compose. So you could build anything that is using a library that's within your common build.gradle. So if we go find our build.gradle file here, you'll see that we've got these Compose dependencies here within the common main source set. So anything that's there, we can utilize in our shared Jetpack Compose. And again, because this is common and it's shared between Android and iOS, these dependencies have to be Kotlin native dependencies. So another kind of drawback right now currently that, you have to use Kotlin native dependencies compiled code in order to, use it in the shared portions of your apps. So kind of a drawback, but so here you have the app. Now, again, I said this is running on Android and iOS, so anything you change here, you could actually compile it within Android Studio to be an iOS app or to be an Android app, and it will launch the iOS simulator on your Mac if you compile it to iOS, and it will launch just the emulator within Android Studio if you do it that way. And what's really, really cool about that is you can actually build it and deploy it from Android Studio to the iOS simulator. So you don't even need to go into Xcode to do that, which is kind of cool. The IDE kind of handles that for you and makes your life a little bit easier. So that's cool. The only other thing I'll call out is that the other thing that they've kind of built in here is the resources directory. So you think about, what you would have in just a regular Android app. You would have, string resources. You might have images, some other sorts of assets. Those will actually be able to be used in the UI code of Compose iOS. So that's pretty cool. All right, so I figured too what I might do is show you guys in the IDE kind of what this looks like when you build it on iOS and on Android. So I went ahead and cloned that repo that I was just showing onto my Mac and just called it Compose iOS template here. So I'm going to change this to the project view just so that we can get to these directories a little easier. We'll go into shared, we'll go to source, we'll go to common main, and then Kotlin, and into the app. So this is the app we were just looking at, and again, it says hello world here. What I'll do first is I'll build this on Android and show you kind of what it looks like on Android once it's built. So I will build this on Android, and it will take quite a few minutes. So I will pause this video and come back in a second. Right, so it just finished building. And you see here what it's doing is it built it over here in the emulator. So what happens is, again, you click Hello World and it turns to Hello Android because that's the platform it's on. And you get a nice little Jetpack Compose logo that'll move in and out if you toggle the button. So cool. So there it is working on Android. Let me close the emulator here. And to run this on iOS, all you have to do is click the drop down here and choose iOS app. And once you choose it, you can run it just like you would an Android app. And it's going to take a few minutes to compile it and build it. This does take a good bit longer than the Android compilation does. So the first couple of times that you build it, you might want to just take a break because it'll take a little bit. So I'm going to pause the video again and come back once this loads. All right, so it is just finished building. It launched the iOS simulator, and look at this. We have Jetpack Compose code running on iOS, and just like on the Android device, when we click Hello World, it changes to Hello iOS, and you get the Jetpack Compose logo popping in and out. I will say one caveat to this that you might run into is this Compose iOS project uses CocoaPods on iOS for dependency management. So if you don't have CocoaPods, that GitHub repo for the Compose iOS actually has instructions on using KDoctor to check and make sure that you have the proper things installed before you build this on iOS, because you could run into some issues there. But yeah, that's Compose for iOS. I appreciate you guys watching the video. Be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you again next time.